Well, Howard Stern is done. Maybe. Hi, I'm Pastor Marty. This is the Afternoon Drive. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure that you are a subscriber to the channel, and once you are, smack the bell, click the word all. That'll give you a notification of my rants, my ravings, my undeniably flawless reasonings. Please like and share this video. It's the only way that we can get the word out that we're here. Thank you so much for watching and being a part of the Afternoon Drive. Let me say two things at the outset here. Number one, there won't be any video editing. I have nothing to splice in here today, so you're getting just moi. And please forgive my voice. I am suffering from some seasonal allergies right now, on top of the fact I just got through doing a rather extensive, exhaustive live in-person teaching session, so my voice is beyond tired. But I wanted to get to this topic. Howard Stern has been canceled. This is the way the conservative media is going at this, and by all practical purposes, he probably is Sirius XM. He had, what was it, like a $500 million contract, and he's in the final 100 million of it. But if you read the articles that talk about this, what it basically says is not that they are canceling Howard Stern, or not that they are not going to offer him a new contract. They're simply going to offer him a contract he's not going to say yes to. But he might. I mean, at this stage of the game, he doesn't really need the money. And, let's say they thought, let's just offer him $5 million, for 5 years, and there's no way he'll do it for that. And then we don't have to get in trouble with, all of the political elites that we all have the same allegiance to, like Howard Stern and the political left and the Hollywood elite. We can just say we just couldn't make the numbers work. Howard is a big enough of a that he just might say, yeah, I'll take your $5 million, and I'll give you 5 more years. Not likely, but he could. He's 71. What else has he got to do? I mean, he could try to go online and launch his own thing that way. That would mean he'd have to spend his own money, make investment in himself. And I think he's actually scared that he'll fall flat on his face. Because let's be honest, Howard Stern hasn't been relevant for what? At least 10 years and probably longer. He's been on XM radio for what, like 20 years. So you had to have a subscription to hear him. And XM and satellite radio, they're losing subscribers because you can get all this stuff for free. And even like your niche radio stations that play all 50s, all 60s, etc. There are so many streaming platforms that play all of that you can get for absolutely free. And as far as cutting edge content and smart political commentary, again, Howard Stern did a U-turn. Now, back in like the 80s and 90s, he actually had some kind of Republican-leaning beliefs. He helped George Pataki get elected governor of New York. He liked Rudy Giuliani and what he was doing in New York City. He liked Donald Trump. Donald Trump was a guest over 30 times on the Howard Stern radio show. But he took all that money, went with Sirius XM, and he got around all of the Hollywood elite, and he became friends with people like Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel and all that ilk. And now, he's got the worst case of Trump derangement syndrome, and every day his show is nothing more than, attack Trump, attack Trump, attack Trump, attack Trump. Now, he calls himself the king of all media. He hasn't been the king of media in ever. He doesn't want to do a podcast and come on and do what a lot of us do. I don't earn my living this way. It's a good thing. You can tell by the subscribers I don't. I'm not monetized. I do this because it gives me a place, a vehicle to come and pontificate and share with you my valuable insight. But there are people who do this for a living. And there's no way, I'm sorry, that Howard Stern, he knows he can't compete with a Joe Rogan, with a Tucker Carlson. Shoot, I don't even think he can compete with like a Tim Pool. I don't think he can do it. Maybe a Patrick Bet-David, but he is a good. I don't think he could take on and take over Crowder's numbers. I don't think he can do it. So he's been in the safe world of XM radio, and they're hemorrhaging money on him, and they don't have the subscribers, and, you know, bye. Now, let me say a couple things here about Howard Stern. He became famous for being a shock jock. Let me explain to you what that is. He couldn't cut it as a real jock. See, I still dabble as a part-time disc jockey. I've done radio most of my whole life and was even doing daily radio just up until recently, and finally just had to let that go, you know, because I do pastor a church full-time. I teach, I preach, I travel and speak, etc. I'm busy. That all said, I still host a 2-hour weekly oldies radio show where I get to be Marty B and spin those platters that matter. So come along with me and take a stroll through those turnstiles of record piles. It's a retro gold blast from the past. You know, I love oldies rock and roll, and I do a 2-hour show where I get to just play records and be a DJ. I love it. Howard Stern couldn't cut it as a DJ. In fact, I've heard some of his old air checks. He pretty much sucked. He was not a good DJ. He wasn't interesting. He just flat sucked. So he fell on this shtick that eventually got him to WNBC in New York, of basically just being outrageous. See, he himself doesn't have any talent. He himself, you know, he's not a terribly bright guy. So what did he do? Well, you know, he'd have strippers on and they would talk about their sex lives with Howard, and he'd describe to the audience, you know, how they were inserting things into their body, and this was shocking radio. Shock jock. Now, on the one hand, as a media guy, as a broadcast guy, I ought to say, wow, got to give him his props on that. No, but I can't, because he's just a vulgar pig. He always has been. And he degraded people on his show. He liked to bring on stars who are well past their prime, who had hit on troubled times, and he would just absolutely eviscerate them and just shred away any last piece of dignity they might be trying to cling to. He had Bob Denver, the guy that played Gilligan on Gilligan's Island, you know, had him on there explaining how, you know, none of the cast from Gilligan got residuals or royalties, etc. So they didn't make any money on the show. And he got Gilligan to smoke a tampon on his show. What? You know, he had Dana Plato, played the sister, Kimberly Drummond, on Different Strokes. Allowed his audience to so just devour her over her, you know, drug problems, crying on the air, and she ends up a day or two after being on the Howard Stern show dying of a drug overdose. He had Erin Moran, Joni Cunningham, basically absolutely degraded and humiliated her on the air. And he's done it time after time after time after time after time. He is a disgusting pig. When he went to XM radio, he did a U-turn and he went woke. You go woke, you go broke. And so he lost a big chunk of his audience and the people that weren't going to pay a subscription to listen to him. Because again, he's not all that interesting. You think about in your day when you finally decide to take a look at media and see what's going on. Who are people quoting? They're quoting Joe Rogan. They're quoting Tucker. They're talking about this podcast, that podcast. What was the last time, other than today, when they announced, that he's getting canceled, have you even thought about Howard Stern? He went nuts during COVID. Came on every day lecturing us that we were killing people by breathing and living our lives while he locked himself away in his $30 million mansion and stayed there over a year. I mean, he's just a woke bot. Now, I'll wrap it up with this. He and the timing of Colbert being gone and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting folded this week and a bunch of these media watchdog. Could there be any coalition to all of that and that money that was used to pay for all that and the closing of USAID? Bump and bump. I told you I'm not splicing in video today. Bump and bump bump. Yeah. Howard Stern, shock jock to tool of the deep state. I think that's a pretty good way to sum up his so-called career.